All right, week 9, fascism. Fascism, Nazism, all that reactionary stuff. A lot of force and violence associated with that. And if you look at the study guide, there's only one thing on the list. It's called Fascism's Main Philosophical Traits. So you should know all of them, right? When you do the 2 readings, kind of pick up on them. Okay, we're going to go through them very carefully. There's 3 in my reading on fascism. That would be authoritarianism, organicism, and irrationalism. So we're going to go through each one. But before we get to my reading, we're going to go to the one by James Whisker on Italian fascism. So if you look at the second paragraph on page 1, the roots of fascism are many and complex. The fascist leadership, notably Mussolini, admitted the multifaceted influences of liberalism, Marxism, syndicalism, Risorgimento, which is basically Italian unification, socialism, Catholicism, and nationalism on their ideology. So fascism is a unique blending of all of these ideologies. And it's a unique blending because it is a pragmatic attempt at creating an ideology, not just to transform the state, because there's not much, like, unlike Marxism, there's not much of transformation going on. It's more about acquiring power. So fascism is about getting power. How do you get power? Well, you take the best of all the ideologies in order to win over as many people as possible. So you want to win over the royalists. So you're going to have to, talk about how important the monarchy is, right? You're going to try to win over the socialists. So you're going to tell them that you are going to make sure that they have a job and they get paid what they earn. You're going to cater to the nationalists and say, look, we are Italian and through, and we're going to protect your rights as Italians. And also, we're liberal, meaning we're going to protect private property. So if you go down to the last paragraph on the first page, you'll see that it accepts capitalism and socialism to enhance the role of the state. So the state acts as this mechanism by which you can get all segments of society to work together, and so you cater to the needs of capitalists and socialists, a labor force. And this is the it's called corporatism, corporatist. So corporatist is not like rule of corporations or big business. Corporatist means that the state is in charge, is in power, and will be able to manage the economy. So the state is in control of the economy, and the state is in control of all the decision-making processes that go into what people want. And so the state is the state, and the state gets to choose what the society is going to look like. And that means individuals don't have the freedom to question the state. So you don't have the ability to oppose the state or question the state, because as you read on, you realize that the state is it's a person, right? And so the state is given this life, and the state is supreme, and the state is permitted to exist, and any threat to that state must be destroyed. And so the state is the highest form of existence, and the state itself is fomented in war. So war and fascism, you can't really divorce the two, because the state relies on war to survive, and the state relies on war to expand its influence. And that's why Italian fascism, when it came to power, it began a war first in Libya and then in Ethiopia and then in Europe, and it just never stopped. So World War II for Mussolini never really began in 1939 as it did for the rest of the world. They were fighting a war since the 1920s. And so Mussolini was a socialist in the past, but he wasn't being successful, so he appropriated what he thought was the best of Marxism, essentially, to gain power. And he relied on this idea in a myth, like there was a in the Monday reading, the one that's entitled Monday. It says that Sorel found Marx to be impractical, and Sorel is this person that Mussolini builds on. So Sorel disagreed with Marx, and then Marx appropriated Sorel into his modus operandi. And so for Sorel, it's about myth, developing a myth, and developing that myth through violence, right? This idea that if you believe in something and you make it happen, even through violence, then ultimately it is true and it is real. And so Marx never really touched on this. He was talking about a material world. And so it's about the irrational. It's about the belief. So if you believe something in fascism, if there is a belief, if people are united and act as if the myth were real, then ultimately that would mean that this myth can consolidate and usher and generate reality. So that is the essential aspect of syndicalism, and that is what fascists also believe in. And so the state justifies its actions through the myth, and it orders and enforces compliance with that requirement. So it creates, remember Rousseau's general will? It creates a new general will that forwards and pushes the state to exist and to thrive. And the rest of the reading is very much about history and how it is applied. And that's important for you. It's important for you to understand the application of some of these ideas, because that's what you'll be tested on in the final exam. So the next reading is my own work. So I wanted to share with you my own work, and this is a great opportunity. And so I combined my passions on international relations, international security, and political theory to create this article published by Democracy and Security. And so the main ideas is that the more the world becomes multipolar, the more the United States declines in power, which it seems to, that's what's happening today, and the more China and Russia rise, the more authoritarian, the more myth-centric, and the more narcissistic in terms of organicism, the body, the health of the body is going to matter for these three countries. And that includes the United States. Don't forget, and we're going to read this in week 14, within democracy is this fascist bent, like it leans toward it, because with all this freedom, there is still the need to secure the state. And I want to describe that further in the article that I wrote. So states seek security, right? And sometimes security threats manifest itself internally. And so you don't need to have brown shirts running around, or you don't need people wearing swastikas running around and telling you what to do. Fascism doesn't need to occur like that. It doesn't have to fit that mold. There are certain elements that you do have to tease out and you have to expect. And technology becomes very important in the implementation of this. And so the first trait that I want to talk about is absolutism or authoritarianism. So the more concentrated in an executive the country becomes, the more it borrows from fascism. Now, there's a difference between fascist governments and governments that have or adopt fascist traits. It's very different. So you could have a democracy and there being some fascist traits in that democracy. It's not mutually exclusive, but there might be some overlap. So pay close attention to what I'm trying to say here. So in Russia, there's clearly a concentration of power in Putin. In China, there's the same concentration of power in Xi Jinping right now. But as well, over time, the United States executive has amassed incredible power, so much so that, as you see with the reading that we posted, my reading, that I show you in detail how. We're going to get to that in a second. Organicism is another trait. So organicism means that the state is a body, it's an organism, and there are threats to that organism, and those threats must be eliminated, right? And so there's a lack of agency within people who don't fit into that. So if you don't fit into a specific mold, then you are ostracized and sometimes eliminated. The last thing, of course, is irrationalism. This idea of a myth. It needs to be a myth, like we talked about the syndicalist Sorel myth. And the myth is this determination to act. And so the United States, China, and Russia all have these sorts of myths that we need to look out for. So in China, let's go back to absolutism. I know I'm going fast on this, but you can reread and rewind here, no problem. So absolutism, again, is this concentration of power in the executive branch of government. We're seeing this in China because Xi Jinping has consolidated power to himself so much that he's changing the constitution and he's creating a cult of personality in China. So we in the United States have to be wary of that. There's something going on in China. It's becoming more fascist. It's becoming more authoritarian. And this might allow us a chance for the United States government to reorient its approach to China. Russia under Vladimir Putin is undergoing the same process where he is really consolidating power within him, and the entire government in Russia is bent on that. But the United States also has its own problems with the concentration. So in the United States, there is a proclivity to strengthen the executive branch of government. And on page 134 of the Kassab reading, my reading, you can see how there is this concentration of power, the expansion of federal powers to the executive branch, the way in which the role of the president in popular culture has been consolidated and increased. The fact that Congress doesn't declare war anymore, but we use executive action in certain parts of the world, and this sort of leads into conflict or war, like in Vietnam. And also this rise of a two-party system, which basically party loyalty trumps institutional prerogative. So all of these issues, I think we need to look out for in the concentration of power in the executive branch. The same can be said with organicism in the United States regarding the National Security Agency's metadata programs, how much of our movement is tracked by Google Maps, Uber, Amazon, Facebook, and so forth. So we are being tracked and surveilled in many ways. TikTok is another thing, but China is the one doing the data collection in that regard. There's no fly lists that kind of inhibit our ability to travel and so forth. And so the Constitution in the United States, it's undergoing major problems in that the executive branch is overstepping its bounds. The government is overstepping its bounds. Then we have China and the social credit score system, which is actually quite scary to me. So let's say you do a Google search in China for Tiananmen Square, then boom, you're going to put on a list, and then your social credit score will decrease, and that will inhibit your ability to maybe move around freely, like get a bus ticket or so on. it's all documented in the reading. The same is in Russia. In Russia, there's like LGBTQ people are being persecuted. In China, Muslims are being persecuted. So all of these aspects are being considered threats to the state, and we have to be very wary of these developments. The same can be said with irrationalism, this idea of a belief system. American exceptionalism is a major thing. So in order for us to be kept safe, there is this neoconservative idea that the United States has to basically patrol and police the entire world, and this can be very, very expensive on the reputation of the United States in terms of its reputation as liberty-loving, freedom-loving. So the United States must defend its reputation at all costs. And some of these actions around the world must be I think more thought must be put into it. So defending the reputation of the United States is, above all, very, very important. Russian exceptionalism, that's another thing. Russia seems to think that it can march all over Crimea and Ukraine because that's part of its sphere of influence. That's, again, an irrationalist belief, and it tramples on the rights of Ukrainians to actually plot out their course of action. Then we have China and China's belief in this exceptionalism idea, and the fact that they think they have their own place in the world, and that goes against the rights, the sovereignty, the interests of other countries in the world. So again, there's some main philosophical traits of fascism. Fascism is a pragmatic ideology, it seems, that borrows from a multiplicity of different perspectives, and the three main traits are absolutism, organicism, and irrationalism. And you need to know how to apply these for the exam. So go over the readings, make sure you know it, make sure how it works, get familiar with the history in the first reading that we explored on Italian fascism. I think that's going to be very important to you. That would be the reading by James Whisker, and then my own reading. And so we've finished the major state-led philosophies. So the next thing is terrorist manifestos, anarchism, gender, postmodern, post-colonial, and then I will deal with the future of the world. Who knows what the future will hold, but I know what the future holds for you, is that you're going to read some more. Thank you very much.